bone density, addiction pathways. What happens to your body when you literally cannot afford your next dose? Those are the Ozempic side effects that you've heard about, right? And everybody knows, we all know about the stuff that's happening in your gut, like everybody talks about this. What they're not talking about is what this stuff might be doing to your skeleton. Or the fact that it's rewiring the exact same circuitry that lights up when your body wants a drink, or a cigarette, or, I'm not exaggerating, cocaine. That's a real study, and trust me, we are getting there tonight. So you guys, grab your flashlight and follow me down the trail because we are in for a bit of a ride. This is my GLP-1 investigative series, part 2, the side effects. So that's the actual question we're exploring tonight. Not, does this drug have side effects? Obviously it does, but it's what happens when they stack. We have 5 threads that we will be pulling tonight. Your gut, your bones, your brain, your muscle, and what happens when you can't afford your next dose. Each one on its own is a data point, but put them all together, and I think you'll see the picture. Okay, no more blabbering. We're gonna get right into it with study number 1. So this study in 2023 reported on the GI adverse events and the severity across GLP-1 users. So here's the important thing that I really want to clarify in this video. It's not just that the GI side effects are common, we know that already. It's how severe it gets for a subset of people. We're talking hospitalization level of gastroparesis. Okay, this isn't just like I ate too much at lunch type of nausea. And if you don't know what gastroparesis is, it's a very severe condition where your gut slows down enough that it actually becomes paralyzed. And this is massive because not only is that a problem in and of itself, but it raises a ton more side effects. Things like kidney failure, things like dehydration. Your body cannot process even water, let alone things like drugs, medication, food, nutrition, vitamins and minerals. Nothing gets through your intestinal tract. And that causes a host of issues. It can be very, very dangerous. And there is a subset of people that this has happened to because of the GLP-1. So this research letter, it pulled records from a database of 93% of outpatient people who were prescribed a GLP-1. And that's 16 million people. And they looked for everybody who was on a GLP-1 specifically for weight loss, not for diabetes, not for anything else. And then they compared those people to people on a different type of weight loss drug. So here are the numbers that came from that letter. Compared to the group on a different weight loss drug, people who were on a GLP-1, they had 4 times the risk of a bowel obstruction. Also, 4 times the risk of gastroparesis, and pancreatitis, over 9 times the risk. Now, I do want to be really clear, 9 times sounds insane, but I'm not going to sit here and act like every number in this letter is bulletproof, okay? The pancreatitis number came from a really small study pool, so the confidence on that one is a little bit wishy-washy, but it is enough to warrant maybe a larger study. Now, GI effects are also, not coincidentally, one of the top reasons that people stop taking the drug altogether, which brings me to the part of tonight's research that actually kept me up. Here's a study by Zhang and others in 2025, so this is a lot more recent. This one had 18 randomized controlled trials, 3,700 people, and it came out this last November. Researchers pulled every trial where people started at GLP-1, stopped it, and then they got tracked for at least 12 weeks after. And they weren't tracking, things like, oh, did they say that they were hungry again? No. They weren't tracking things like actual weight, blood pressure. So in people with obesity, the average weight gain, and remember, this is just 12 weeks. We're talking 3 months. The average weight gain after somebody stopped the drug was about 12 pounds. It wasn't quite even though. So if you were on semaglutide, then you regained about twice as much than the people who were on liraglutide did. And the reason why that's such a big deal is that semaglutide is a much higher dose of the GLP-1 hormone. So people on semaglutide, yeah, they gained back about 18 pounds in 12 weeks versus 9 from the liraglutide group. And the longer that you've been off the drug, the worse it got. Past 6 months, the weight gain nearly tripled from the people who were checked earlier. And here's the part that rules it out as, oh, people just went back to eating normally. No. People who were on a placebo and therefore continued taking GLP-1, yeah, their numbers barely moved at all. A pound, maybe 2. So this isn't behavior. We can rule that out. This is your body actually doing something the moment that the drug cleared your system. So if stopping the drug once does all of that, what happens when you stop and restart and stop and restart again? Because that's literally what the price of this drug is doing to people. I found 3 different papers, 3 different angles, which all had the same pattern. The first one was a 52-week trial out of China, and it had 65 people with type 2 diabetes, and they split them up into 4 groups: exenatide, dulaglutide, insulin, or placebo. Everyone's bone density got scanned at the beginning and at the end. So the placebo group's bones got measurably weaker over the course of this study. And the exenatide groups, they got stronger. And this one is so fascinating to me because it pointed out a piece of this whole thing that I had no idea about. We're learning over here, that's the point. So what they found is that in terms of bone density, liraglutide actually cut your risk of breaking a bone by almost 60%. However, exenatide, which is a different drug but in the same category, it almost doubled your risk of breaking a bone. So that dichotomy was really weird to me, but there's actually a very scientific reason for it. Liraglutide, remember liraglutide is a version of the GLP-1 hormone that's a much lower dose than semaglutide. Semaglutide being what's in Ozempic, what's in Wegovy, so liraglutide is just like a step below. And liraglutide is chemically actually almost an identical photocopy of the GLP-1 hormone that your body already makes. It's about 97% identical, whereas exenatide is about only 50%. So one of these drugs seems to be just kind of like topping off what your body is already doing naturally, and the other one is a fully synthetic version trying to completely replace the hormone in your body. And the difference is showing up in your bones. Okay, so we have the bones down, we have the gut down, but let's go to the part that really gets me going, and that is your brain. I want to talk about something that really worries me, and that is the fact that GLP-1s, they actually dampen your entire reward system in your brain. And while that can be good and helpful, like we'll see in a couple of the studies, it can also lead to some pretty detrimental and maybe even fatal consequences. So this right here is a comprehensive physiology report, and this came out this year in 2026. So this is a huge review, pulling together all of the studies that have been done on animals and humans that have to do with GLP-1 and the brain's reward system. So in animals, they found that this class of drugs reduces cravings, not just for food, but for alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, cocaine, you name it. And they do this by acting directly on the same dopamine circuit that lights up during addiction. And it's not just mice, there's a human trial too. So they studied people with diagnosed alcohol use disorder, and they gave them weekly exenatide. And boom, their brain scans actually showed less activity in the alcohol cravings when shown alcohol cues. And they had fewer heavy drinking days. And a second trial with semaglutide this time showed the exact same thing. So this is not a side effect in the way that we normally use that phrase. This, in my opinion, is a good thing, and it can help a lot of people overcome addiction. But the problem is, when that turns dark, it turns really dark. In July of 2023, the FDA opened an investigation into tons of reports that they were getting for suicidal ideation from people who were on GLP-1s. A preliminary review in January 2024 didn't necessarily find a link, but honestly the numbers were so small to be confident either way. Now eventually they did remove the suicidal ideation warning from the labels. But I don't know about you, it raises a big flag to me when we're talking about dampening the entire reward system, because you can't just target one or two things that you don't want to feel dopamine for anymore. What it's actually doing is turning off the dopamine response in general, in its entirety. And what that means is that you don't feel joy anymore from really anything. And in my opinion, it's no wonder that then people would lose hope, they'd lose joy, they would lose all sense of getting out of their situation. It's not something wrong with them, and it's not something wrong with their life. It is simply the drug telling them nothing makes you feel happy anymore. And that's a problem if I've ever heard one. And there is a separate cohort study that backs this up. They actually found a 3-fold increase in depression diagnoses when a specific group of people were taking a GLP-1. So it's not imagined. There are people out there who are reporting something called Ozempic personality, which means that they don't find joy from the things that they used to. This is a real concern, and one that people are not taking seriously enough. Alright, let's take a second. I know I just threw a lot at you. And I want to be clear that none of what I'm saying is telling you to not take this drug. I'm not trying to scare you off. I am simply trying to tell you everything that you need to know about the drug, because if it's your aunt, your brother, even you deserve to actually know what's sitting in the literature, not what the people who are being paid are telling you. Okay, let's move forward. Another angle I found was that of muscle loss. This one is a study that was published this year from a Chinese hospital. They had 220 people over the age of 65. And these were people who had type 2 diabetes and were also on semaglutide. And then they matched them up with 212 people that were not on a semaglutide. They tracked them for 2 full years. And by the end, the semaglutide group, they had significantly less muscle. They also had weaker grip strength, a slower walking speed, and the effect was way worse the higher the dose got. One weird little wrinkle that I do want to call out, the grip strength, it actually got better in the first 6 months before rapidly declining after that. So, little funny, whatever's happening, it's not necessarily a straight line down, but in the end, it is. Now, one little thing that the authors actually added in is that they weren't able to actually track the patient's diets or exercise habits, so we don't fully know if anything like that contributed here. Is this the drug directly, or are they eating less protein because the drug has side effects? But what it does mean pretty definitively is that at least if you're over the age of 65, you are likely going to have a pretty dramatic decrease in your muscle mass. The last 3 side effects that we're going to talk about today are smell and taste, thyroid, and vision. A new study came out actually really recently. I think it was only like 8 days ago or something like that. They measured over 400,000 patients, and they found that GLP-1 users, they had 48% of a higher risk for a smell and taste disturbance. Actually, it was 81% higher for smell specifically, and 52% higher for taste. So that's very interesting, and I'm hoping that we're going to get a lot more studies about this, being that this is one of the first ones that I've ever seen. It's a pretty large sample size and a pretty severe risk. So that is definitely something I want to flag to you. Now when it comes to the effects of GLP-1 on the thyroid, there's a lot of back and forth. A lot of people saying that it can increase the risk of thyroid cancer. A lot of other people saying no, that's just obesity or diabetes. That doesn't have anything to do with the GLP-1. What I will say is that this study out of France showed that people who used GLP-1 for 1 to 3 years, they had a 58% higher risk of thyroid cancer overall, and 78% higher risk of medullary thyroid cancer, which is an even more aggressive type of thyroid cancer. And the FDA actually put the warning for medullary thyroid cancer on the label simply from rat studies. Studies hadn't even been done on humans yet. And the FDA said, you know what, just put a warning out there. So now we do have a study from France on humans showing that that is in fact true. Now that's not to say that that's causation. It could be correlation like people are saying. But I just want you to know that that's still hotly debated. We don't have the answer yet. I'm also not saying that this study was done perfectly. It's not the most unbiased way to do a study. You can look it up for yourself if you want to read really in depth about it. I always want to encourage you to do your own research. Don't just take my word for it. I will link all of the studies below if you want to go check them out for yourself, and I highly encourage that you do that. And last one I want to talk about today, even though there are more side effects that we could cover, I don't want to bore you guys too much. So the last one that we're going to cover is vision. Now, how in the world would a GLP-1 affect your vision? Well, let me tell you. Now, this one is out of Massachusetts Eye and Ear, which is actually attached to Harvard. It is a retrospective cohort with 6 years of data. They pulled every person who came through with vision loss, and they split them up into 2 groups. Whether they had type 2 diabetes or were overweight and obese, and the ones who were prescribed semaglutide. And here are the numbers. Patients with diabetes who were on semaglutide had over 4 times the risk of NAION. That is a stroke of the optic nerve in your eyes, accompanied by sudden, painless vision loss. Completely. And there's no treatment or cure. For the overweight and obesity group who didn't have diabetes, people who were like on Wegovy or something like that, the risk was over 7.5 times higher. Now, the sample size was really small, and it was only this one clinic that did it. But again, that is a very severe risk for us not to do more studies on this. So again, I will link it down below, and if you want to go out and look more into NAION, then be my guest. But the reason why this might be happening is that GLP-1 receptors are present in the optic nerve. So by flooding your body with this new synthetic version of that hormone, it can kind of cause those receptors to freak out a little bit. So there you have it. 5 different threads and a lot of individual filings. So I want to kind of just put them all together and see what we see. People start taking GLP-1. They get some pretty bad side effects like nausea, loss of appetite, maybe a loss of joy, and so they stop taking it. And then stopping produces the rebound that we talked about. Weight comes back fast, it comes back worse, and especially if you were on semaglutide. But here's the part that people miss, is that muscle was already being lost even when you were on the drug, not just what happened when you stopped taking it. So when you restart, then you're not starting from zero. You're starting from a worse body composition than the first time. Your muscle mass has decreased while you were on the drug, it didn't come back while you were off of it, and then it kept going down when you got back on. Do that for 2 or 3 cycles, and all of these numbers start going down a little, and the risks start going up a little bit. And then there's also the fact that liraglutide seems to affect the body in a drastically different way than semaglutide. One being very, very similar to the hormone that your body naturally produces, and the other being completely synthetic. And your body can quite clearly tell the difference. Again, it shows up in the reward circuitry, it shows up in your bone density. So the entire conversation, it treats GLP-1s as all the same thing, when really it's not. And it should very much be studied and talked about in a drastically different way. That lack of distinction, it's doing a lot of quiet damage to how people view the risk. So when I tell you that the research says maybe it's probably fine, you should read that with a little asterisk. It's fine for who? Monitored by who? Paid for by who? Because that's the other thing here, is that not all of these studies are clean studies. Not all of them are independently funded. The extension trial that I showed you, that shows you what happens when you stop using the drug, that was funded by Novo Nordisk. The paper on how the drug affects your appetite and your eating behavior, funded by Novo Nordisk. A safety review published in a major journal, that was written by a paid Novo Nordisk consultant. And then there's my personal favorite, a paper about Ozempic face. The hollowed out look that people tend to get from rapid weight loss. That was written by 4 doctors who all take money from companies like L'Oreal, LVMH, from dermal filler and skin tightening companies. Okay, these are not unbiased papers. Clearly evidenced by the fact that the prescription for fixing Ozempic face is to buy the products from the companies who paid the people to write the paper. And that's not even the strangest one. I pulled federal payment records, and these are public, by the way, you can go look this up, and I found 3 plastic surgeons who all got paid by Novo Nordisk on the exact same 2 days. And they were paid something in terms of like a consulting fee. And as an added bonus, that was right around the time that Wegovy got approved for use. I have no idea what that event was. There was no public-facing event. None of those doctors posted about anything. I really want to know what. What the hell were 3 plastic surgeons doing? Consulting a company that's pushing prescription drugs for obesity. Weird. Now, not everything in this video was compromised. We did have some independently funded research studies. The rebound data, the bone density research, the muscle loss study, those were all clean. But when you zoom out on the whole picture, the same handful of names keep coming up every so often, especially on the side of the studies that make the drug look safer, more effective, or make the fix for the side effects look a little too much like a shopping list. So that's not a conspiracy. They're actually required to tell you who funds the study. So again, you can scroll to the bottom of every study that I have presented to you, and you can look for yourself who funded which one. I would just rather that you see it for yourself and decide what you think it means, rather than listen to somebody who's being paid. Alright, so what now? Here's the little, tied up in a little bow if you want one. These aren't separate side effects that I've just laid out for you. It's one compounding cycle, right? Made even worse by the fact that a lot of people are not using the drug properly. And it's typically happening to a population that the studies were actually never built to watch. So here you have it, my synthesis of 6 separate, well-documented side effects. And you can take it or leave it. You are allowed to disagree with me and sound off in the comments if you want. And there are a lot of benefits of Ozempic. So if you'd like me to do a deep dive into those as well, let me know, and I would be happy to. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I am just here to tell you where to look. And with that, my next video will be getting into the people with the side effects who went to court over them. So stay tuned. Bye.